2004, the Lord sent a prophet from Zambia, Africa, to confirm for this church some of the things that I've been saying, the spirit of what was going on. He sent me some help, and I left this out of the last video. The Lord kind of reminded me, so I thought I'd circle back. South Point Church, we've been ministering in there for, I don't know, about a year, almost a year in power, year and a half. I needed some help reasserting the information and the lessons and everything that was going on. And there's a minister out of Zambia known as Big Man amongst all the witch doctors. I'm not going to give his name. I'm friends with him on Facebook. He preaches in churches all over America, from Illinois down to Texas, all the way over to Florida. If I said his name, probably tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people that know this guy. Well, he just happened to visit Dallas around the same time that I was ministering with my family at South Point Church. And he was staying with a guy, didn't have any transportation, so I went over and I picked him up one day, take him around, run some errands, wanted to buy some things for his family, so I took him to some various stores, and then we stopped in for lunch at Jason's Deli on Highway 75. And as we were waiting on our food, I asked him, I'm going to call him Chris. I said, Chris, what do you think about the American church? Just asked him about the American church in general. I didn't ask him about South Point Church. And he said, he leaned back in his chair. He was kind of careful about saying anything. You could tell he was thinking it through, and then he just spoke up and he said, Jay, there's two things I notice everywhere I go in America. It doesn't matter where I'm preaching. It doesn't matter if it's a spirit-filled church, if it's a Baptist church. It doesn't matter what kind of church it is, what denomination. He said, I see two things everywhere I go. In the churches, he says, I see a remnant of people that are really hungry for the Lord. Because I see it everywhere I go. People are hungry. And then he said, in most churches, I see something else. Even though I'm invited in, he said, I see the leadership of the church often trying to hold the people down. He said they're pushing the people down. They won't let them rise up in the faith. And then he said, one of two things is about to start happening in the American system. Either the leadership is going to repent and they're going to get out of the way and allow the Lord to bring in the measures of faith and grace that he would will in the people and the times and the ways that he would, or he's going to start removing them one by one. He says it's the same way, same way everywhere he goes. Sorry, this tarp is moving around. But I see the same thing all the time. Coincidentally, on this trip, they let him minister. In the church. The pastor just happened to be out of town, so they decided to let him minister in the congregation for the first time. Even though he knew a lot of people in Dallas, they weren't letting him minister. This guy had his own church in Zambia. So they finally let him in the pulpit. He was very gracious. I remember he was wearing a nice suit. I remember he was thanking the leadership of the church for allowing him to come in and connect with the people. And he just began to give testimony about all the miracles that God was doing in Zambia, in that church, all over wherever he was at in Africa. And you could tell it was stirring people up. Now, those stories are riveting. They're captivating. It's basically like Paul recounting his travels in the book of Acts. And at the end of the service, he did an altar call, and he had all the elders come forward. They all stood in the front in a big row. The Youth pastor was down at the front. Tony, the one I told you about. All the elders are down there, except for the senior pastor who's out of town. And then he steps down out of the pulpit and he calls everyone forward, and everyone got out of their chair and got in a big long single file line from the center aisle all the way back from the altar all the way out into the lobby. They wouldn't come down and allow all the elders to pray and minister to them. They literally stood in a single file line waiting for this man to pray over them. And you could tell it made the elders of this church kind of uncomfortable. But what it was showing was that he had a message and a ministry and a flow to him that the other guys did not have. Otherwise, people would have been down there seeking prayer from the rest of the group. I stood to the side in the sanctuary and I said to my wife, "Are you seeing this?" And I watched the elders collectively gather and step to the side and just let him minister. I don't know how long he was there. I had spent so much time with him, I just didn't need to take up any more of his time while he ministered, so we left. There's no telling how long he was there. There's a guy by the name of Rocky Malloy. You can look him up on the internet. He is well known throughout Central and South America for getting Christian curriculum into the public school system in a lot of countries, starting with Bolivia, I think Panama, several other nations. He and his wife Joski have been in the ministry pretty much, I guess, his whole adult life since he came to the Lord. He started out ministering in a Honduran war zone after he was converted, and then somehow he married Joski, and he found his way into Santa Cruz, Bolivia, where he started a concept called G12, groups of 12, where people ministered and discipled, in groups of 12. And what it did was it started a revival in Santa Cruz, Bolivia that, if I'm remembering the story correctly, they had, I think, a couple of 100,000 people in their cell church movement in Santa Cruz. So on Sundays, they may have only 1,000 people at the main sanctuary, but throughout the city, they had, I think, close to 200,000, or it may have been more than that. I attended a pastor's conference in Paducah, Kentucky. A friend of mine was on staff at a church that was having a ministry conference in 2003, right as we were transitioning from Church 236. We were living over at Kentwood. I went to Kentucky with the previous associate pastor of Church 236, and Rocky was ministering at this conference. And all of the pastors at the conference were asking him, what do they do to help their congregations grow, and how do they reach the community? Because they were having so much success in Santa Cruz. How did they import that here? And I remember he said a couple things. He said the perception outside the system of America is that America's kind of a burned up, dried up field. And that he said the system in America is built on personality. He said the common perception or the common view is that if you have a pastor that's got a fantastic personality and he's someone you can connect with and he's decent to look at, that was the implication. Great personality, great vibe, great flow, great speaker. He's going to have a big church. But if you have someone that doesn't have that on the exterior, they're probably not going to have a big church. That's what he said. Big personality, big church. Small personality, small church. The American church system thrives on personality. When we were ministering at South Point, we were ministering in a lot of prophetic power. And then in comes Chris from Zambia, basically, for me personally, reasserting my understanding of what in the world is going on. I'm going to start doing more teaching. I'm going to show you what we how we teach in the ministry. I'm going to start doing a lot of teachings on the heart, hearing the voice of God. I'm going to start doing a lot more teaching on how to flow in relationship with the Lord, how to get going in the Lord. My wife right now is ministering in the ladies' ministry at the church that we go to. She taught them on the heart last week, or a couple weeks ago when they met. She taught them how the heart has a relationship with the conscience and how your conscience is the voice of your heart. And the scriptures actually say this over and over. It's never taught. And the ladies just latched onto it. They just latched onto it. They said, we've never heard anyone teach like this before. My wife is on me to start doing all these teachings. So we're going to continue to give testimony of what we have seen and where we've been, what we've done, what we've learned in the process. But we also need to teach. You need to know, you need to have the things that the Lord is already showing you, they just need to be confirmed. If the Lord hasn't shown you these things, He needs to show you these things. He wants you to hear His voice, move in the rhythm of the Spirit, move in the Spirit of God, hear His voice, and do the things that He's called you to do. Enter into the work. You are God's workmanship. You are created in Christ Jesus to do good works. He's prepared these things in advance for you to do. His desire is to assemble you in the body and take away your loneliness, my loneliness. He heals the brokenhearted. He saves those who are crushed in spirit. He sets the lonely in families. He gently leads those who have young. These are all scriptures. These are things that He intends to do in our lives. A lot of times the benefits of the Lord are just simply predicated on hearing the voice of the Lord and doing what you're told. And I know for myself personally, the greatest relationships that I've entered into, the greatest times where I've received from the Lord have all been based on me moving and shifting in the timing and in the place and the way when the Lord told me to move and shift. I was living in Frisco in 1997, and in January I was driving up the tollway, and as soon as I passed under 635 LBJ, He said, move to Midland, Texas. As soon as I drove into Midland, He said, don't get comfortable, you won't be here long. I was there for just barely 6 months, and He told me to move to Albuquerque, New Mexico. And then He told me to do this, and He told me to do that. That's how I met my wife. That's how I entered into a season of ministry at the Olive Garden. That's how I ended up in management with the Olive Garden. I heard the Lord say, pursue management. I heard the Lord say, return to Texas. Your mom's cancer is coming back. You need to be there for her last days. On and on and on and on. I found my wife because I obeyed the voice of the Lord. Had I never left Frisco, I would have never found Christine. Being assembled in the body, flowing in power, entering into the ministry, knowing when it's time to get out, what jobs to have, it's all predicated on His voice. And as you're obeying the voice of the Lord, you're going to have conflict, and you're going to have victory, and you're going to have rejection, and then that rejection is going to lead you on to the next thing that the Lord has for you. Faith to faith, victory to victory. You're going to get wounded. You're going to get cut up sometimes. You're going to have to get healed. You're going to have to learn to wait on the Lord and renew your strength. I'm going to share 100 stories with you. I'm going to get into some teaching, some valuable understanding of what it means to move in the faith. And hopefully this will be a good journey for all of us. So I'm done for the day. There's a storm blowing in. We did our framing today. We're tired. We have one more day to go before the week's over. We can rest a little bit. Wish y'all could see this view. It's gorgeous. God bless.